Planet X spends most of the time in an essential dither point between its two suns, barely moving during the majority of its 3,657-year cycle.
When close to one of its suns, some decades prior to the passage near one of its foci, it is breaking from the midpoint and picking up speed for the approach, and acts like a comet, rapidly zooming through. The straight path does not hold when Planet X nears the Sun. It seeks to avoid encounters with other planetary bodies in the solar system, looking for a path of the least resistance to find its way through ecliptic, crowded by flows of the Sun's particles, for a quick and swift passage. It dives 32 degrees below the ecliptic, and slows to a creep past the Sun, gradually rising to the ecliptic.
Planet X's approach will be less noticeable than could be expected, looking at rapidly diminishing distance.
Earthquakes and volcanoes are reacting to the heating up in the core, which has a great deal of drag, in that it must increase substantially in its activity for a small increase to be evident on the surface. It is at the moment of passage that the Earth most reacts. And prior to this, it is twitching, so to speak.
Man looks at what he calls continental drift, and cannot imagine what set Pangea moving in different directions.
What forces would cause a rock plate to rip apart, and continue to do so? Why would plates drift? Why would the Indo-Australian plate dive under the Himalayas? Why would Atlantic spread, and Pacific compress? What would force those plates to ride over, or plunge under? Convection currents in the mantle? Plate movement is not originating from the Earth's interior, because it is in balance. Why would it suddenly disrupt? There must be an external factor, external force, doing this. 12th planet avoids collision with other planets, due to the gravitational repulsion force that large bodies of this mass evoke between them. However, at the beginning of solar system, there was more than the element of chance involved. Where now it will pass between the Earth and Venus. In the past, Planet X rode on a more distant orbit. Numerous planets, including Proto-Earth, stood in its path. And there were frequent collisions with Planet X's moons, which pelted most of these planets into pieces. Their remnants form an asteroid belt today. One of Planet X's moons then also collided with Earth, and gave it a gaping wound. That is now the Pacific Ocean. This is what triggered continental drift. Prior to that, Earth was a water planet. The collision made it lopsided, and all her waters cooled there, covering this wound like makeup, lowering global ocean level, and revealing dry land. In each subsequent pole shift, land masses that originally came in one piece are jerked around, and try to adjust, to wrap around, and hug the Earth more closely, closing the gap in the Pacific. Each time the Atlantic is widening, and the Pacific shortens. Present tectonic, seismic activity is the result of significant readjustments in the position of the plates during the last pole shift. After a pole shift, the plates come to rest, but there are inequities where stress arises, in this or that point.
Earthquakes between the passages of Planet X are essentially aftershocks from the last pole shift, and since then, it has all been just settling down from those cataclysms.
But why would major plate adjustments happen now? What would cause a plate, as large as the Indo-Australian plate, to pop, springing from its lock of zagged rock all along its edges, miles deep, and snagged, in an infinite number of places, resisting any motion? Now that Planet X is in the vicinity, there is new activity. More activity. Because it is pulling the Earth, while floating past the Sun, and rising to ecliptic. Planet X is grabbing at the highly magnetized mid-Atlantic rift, tugging the Earth from a distance. By gripping the Atlantic rift, Planet X is creating a slow continental drift. Hold the globe with the left hand on the North Pole, the right hand on the South Pole, and turn in opposite directions, as though turning the cap off a jar, in this case the Earth, her plates coming apart. This is tending to open the globe like a jar of pickles, torque wet and twisted open. Earthquakes are now not only domino, or ricochet, but are exhibiting a pole shift pattern. The Atlantic rift is held back, when it faces Planet X, tearing by the momentum to the east, creating a stretching of the Atlantic floor, and a pileup of the plates behind it, in the Pacific. Quakes along Japan and Indonesia, which show compression of the Pacific, do not only bump neighboring plates nearby, they reach across the Pacific, causing a compression quake there, in Alaska or South America, for instance. The Pacific is already being compressed, although slightly, but the pattern is clearly showing. Likewise, the Atlantic is stretching already. Iceland volcanoes sit right on the boundary between Eurasian and North American plates, which are being pulled apart, and thus will be highly active from this point into the future. African rift is showing signs of activity, increasing in its lava oozing, quakes, and huge crevasses opening there. What is remarkable about this new quake pattern, is how all parts of the globe seem to be involved, simultaneously. It is registering as repeated global shuddering on live seismographs. This is the evidence, that an interloper is in the solar system, and closer than most think. There is no other explanation for this present earthquake spread, none.
What will this increasingly violent jerking do to the Earth's plates?
Plates that are coming under increasing pressure will no longer react only with increased quakes, shaking, and minor adjustments along the fault lines. The degree of stress on the crust will increase, with plates adjusting in a predictable manner. The plates will move. This will not be a single quake, or a series of quakes, it will be plate movements, strong enough, significant enough, that it will shock the world. For this to occur, something has to release the current stalemate, where the plates are locked against each other. Great quakes, that affect the globe in its entirety, must first occur at one of the break points, in the global mesh of plates, holding back greater plate movement globally. The plates are being nudged to move, such that the Pacific compresses, and the Atlantic widens. What holds this process back, is primarily the Indo-Australian plate, as it is being jammed, and must be driven under the Himalayas. And this, has a great resistance. This region is leading, and will always lead, with massive earthquakes, because the Indo-Australian plate is so resistant. Being the break point, there is great pressure along that fault line. This is where global adjustments start. When this plate loosens up sufficiently, this will allow dramatic domino motion elsewhere in the world. Large adjustments start with this plate moving. When the primary blockage gives, a big jolt occurs, with little warning. But the trend is unmistakable, long before a major adjustment. Plates are currently under constant pressure, to move in the direction they ought, following the pattern already in place. While one end of the Indo-Australian plate, which hosts New Zealand, is steadily rising. At the same time, the other end, holding India, is plunging, being driven under Himalayas, losing elevation, and resulting in enormous flooding in Pakistan, beginning at the end of July 2010, and still ongoing, with huge pools of standing water that do not drain, more than a year after the flood first started. The tongue of Eurasian plate, the Sunda plate, which is holding most of the Indonesian islands, is being bent, diving under the eastern curve of Indo-Australian plate, as it is pushing forward. The areas to be affected have already been experiencing quake swarms, awakening volcanoes, moving ground, and progressive loss in elevation. With thousands of acres of ruined farmlands, permanently flooded with seawater, and sinking coastlines eaten away by the sea waves. Finally, the plates will be pressed to the point where major movement is next. Indo-Australian plate moves in the direction of Himalayas, diving under them, the plate tilting a bit, and active subduction of India starts. Once the deadlock is broken, suddenly, many other adjustments, elsewhere on the globe, can follow. Indonesian tongue is forced to break off, and subduct under the Indo-Australian plate, submerging those islands and coastlines under the ocean. When the tongue holding Indonesia is effectively pushed down under Indo-Australian plate, there will be a domino action, happening in quick succession, folding small Philippine and Mariana plates like a stack of cards, slanting at an angle. It is primarily this folding of the Pacific that creates a significant reduction in its size, which allows South American plate to move. There is a great coordination of these events. While the core of the Earth wants to continue to pull east in its rotation, the Atlantic Rift is held back, and pulling back the South American plate. As the Atlantic widens at the equator, South America is required to roll its northern part to the west, its tip being anchored, nailed, at the Antarctic. So, as it rolls, great quakes, up to magnitude 9, and mountain building, will happen all along the Andes. Small plates in Central America are crunched, pushed down on one side, as South America tries to roll over the Caribbean plate, with some islands sinking in the Caribbean. Japan. The whole region will be under pressure from the compressing plates in the Pacific. This scenario guarantees mountain building to the islands of southern Japan, particularly at the point where plates converge at Mount Fuji. Major quakes of magnitude 8 to 9 will occur in Japan, and will surely generate tsunami. These quakes will rival the large quakes that Japan has historically suffered, and will be accompanied by sympathetic adjustments on the opposite sides of the Pacific Ring of Fire. When South America rolls, almost in step with the folding Pacific, it tears the Atlantic Rift. This gives Africa freedom to move, and it rolls its bulbous northern part into the void created in the Indian Ocean by subduction of the Indo-Australian plate, opening up the southern Mediterranean floor above Algeria, such that the sea floor there is a crumble, not supported, further opening the African rift. And also putting pressure on the Arabian plate, so that it rolls in place. This does more than pull the entire oil-rich Middle East into a skew. It bursts oil fields in Iraq with flames, into a fiery holocaust. The giant plates of North America and Eurasia are locked against each other, held firm at the top, from Japan to Iceland, unable to turn due to their shape. Due to the Earth torque, North American plate is subject to bowing stress along the west coast, where it confronts the compressing Pacific. New England is being held back, while the southwestern portions of the continent, near Mexico, are pulled to the west, creating a bow round California, all the way from the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, to the tip of Mexico. This creates a diagonal pull on the North American continent, so that the New Madrid seismic zone is put under stress. There has already been numerous minor quake swarms, mining accidents, and separating bridges, like the bridge collapse in Minneapolis, along that line from New England to Mexico, all showing the signs of tension the rock layers are under. At some point, rock will refuse to bow further. For the North American continent to adjust as it is forced to, would require a major adjustment through the center of the continent. The stress on the North American plate will resolve by ripping the continent at a diagonal, in a slip-slide fashion, along the New Madrid and associated fault lines. This process will not just suddenly happen one day, all at once. The New Madrid adjustment will not be a single large quake, but a series, separated by weeks and months. The primary adjustment will at least equal that, which occurred in 1811-1812, 4 large earthquakes with magnitude 8, and will be within days. But due to the presence of large population centers, big cities, the devastation will be worse. This will create quakes, and sinking ground, and precipitate emergencies in almost every state of the Union. The notable area of catastrophe during this is the eastern half of the continental U.S. The principal fault line runs along the Mississippi into Great Lakes, and other end, through Texas into the Gulf, and further west. From Houston, to Chicago, to New England, the diagonal pull will tear the underpinning of cities, and create a catastrophe for the U.S. that will make the New Orleans disaster look trivial. Where most expect the West Coast to be the site of the next devastating quake, tension will be released by an adjustment in the New Madrid area, and will cause more devastation, with fault lines along the West Coast following after, reacting to it. This will result in the predictable earthquake increase. Some volcanoes will erupt. As the New Madrid rifts open North America, it is followed, almost instantly, by the tearing of the Atlantic. North American continent is dropping down into the void, created in the widening Atlantic, its southeastern portion crashing down into the crumbling Caribbean, as neither of these sinking fronts will be able to support the edge of the weighty North American plate. Where a sudden void is created in the North Atlantic, a tide, something like a tsunami, of initial height of 200-300 feet, rushes toward Western Europe, assaulting the lowlands there. A major adjustment of this type unleashes a global round of great quakes, which then subside. It will not be a sudden total movement of any plate, but a series of sequences, with plates being repeatedly nudged, like ships on the waves of hot magma, to move where they ought. This process will be iterative, with each sequence changes becoming more pronounced. Meanwhile, people freak out. For the inhabitants of planet Earth, this will be a wake-up call, as this is clearly not global warming. Can this be global warming causing the Earth's plates to pop, heave and snap?
Men will quake in fear, and while terror walks with them, the heralds of doom will appear. They will come softly, as thieves to the tombs. Men will not know them for what they are. Men will be deceived.
The Earth changes have been lineal, in the years leading into the pole shift, but at some point they become exponential. Exponential growth is uniform, and may not appear alarming for a long time. it can be, in fact, considered quite safe, until numbers suddenly shoot up, skyrocketing, in an almost vertical line, leading to shockingly large numbers, in surprisingly short terms. Earthquakes will continue to increase in frequency and strength, volcanoes will continue to spring to life with little warning, and the weather will continue to become even more erratic. All trends will see a steady increase, culminating in the hour of passage. But should one analyze these statistics, one will see other than linear changes overall. Months before the passage, plate movement becomes continuous, such that significant movement in one area does not start and stop, but just keeps going. Where some expect massive earthquakes, leading up to the pole shift, this will not be the primary source of devastation. Earthquakes, of course, will start to occur in areas not expecting them, thus most devastated by their occurrence. But the actual earth changes will be a movement in the ground. This will reach the point, during the months leading into the pole shift, of leveling cities, demolishing them. Where mankind tends to think of great earthquakes, in areas where subduction takes place, stretch zone accidents will accelerate, as the plates begin to twitch more aggressively. As with the Sumatra quakes, late December 2004, it is the moment when a plate pops out of its restraints, that the drama is most exposed to earthlings, crawling about on the surface. Subduction amounts to relatively quiet trembling, jolting quakes on the surface, as friction shakes the top plate. The stretch zones do not experience great quakes. This is a silent earth change, but the trauma is just as great as in the compression areas. Urban residents are lulled into thinking that they are safe. The underlying rock is stretched, pulling apart, so support of the ground is lacking, and the ground sinks. Such matters happen outside of quake accompaniment. This will create chaos for cities and infrastructure above, and broken communications will be the least of mankind's worry there. Chasms will open up. Roads will tear. And bridges will drop. Buildings will find their infrastructure shifting, or dropping beneath them, and will either implode or slip sideways. Gas and water mains will shatter, with fires and explosions caused by gas leaks, running rampant, affecting whole neighborhoods. Families and cities will find life there unlivable, at some point. More and stronger quakes, such that cities become problematic living in, obsessed with cleaning the last quake's damage, and worried about the next. Devastated cities, shaky and unsafe, will be deemed impossible for residents to return to live there. Now what? Where will they go? Take a city, and move it outside its boundaries, and you have a governmental nightmare. Flooding of New Orleans, in 2005, is a perfect example. Refugee camps will be started, and become the intractable norm, while the governments and media try to downplay the extent of the problem, each local made to believe that this is just a local affair. When the earth changes reach a certain rate, an alarmed populace, seeing the crescendo, will start to panic and riot. Riots will be suppressed in the name of keeping the peace. Martial law will be enacted, at least in local areas. Where the establishment is being pressed for answers, they will have no comment, and will be increasingly inaccessible.
In the last few months, leading into the pole shift, due to ever-increasing Earth wobble, the weather will not simply be a continuation of present weather extremes. Seasons will almost seem to blend into each other. Man may find his winter confusing the crops with unseasonable warmth, and summer, with odd brief snowstorms. This has already occurred, but not yet to the degree to meet the prediction.
The same bizarre weather we are experiencing today was experienced some 3,600 years ago, according to documentation from the reign of Emperor Qin, circa 1600 BC. Frost in July, torrential rainfall, temperature swings, crop shortages, and a disturbed rotation of the earth.
In the 29th year of King Qi, the sun was dimmed. King Qi lacked virtue. The sun was distressed. During the last years of Qi, ice formed in the mornings, and frosts came in the 6th month. Heavy rainfall toppled temples and buildings. Heaven gave severe orders. The sun and moon were untimely. Hot and cold weather arrived in disorder. 5 cereal crops withered and died. This is a precursor of a pole shift.
Meteor showers. It will get to the point where falling boulders are almost a daily affair. The news will stop reporting this, just as they have stopped reporting other worrisome indicators. You hear about this first time it hits the news, and then a squash order on such type of news is issued. What will result will be a disruption of satellite and radio transmission. Meteor traffic will strike the satellites, a major reason for predicted disruption in this area. During the months before the passage of the 12th planet, there will be an almost total interference with radio and television transmission. Cellular telephones will be useless, and due to their popularity, this will not be taken lightly. The governments of the world will be asked to explain, and will trot forth their red-faced scientists with silly explanations. Undoubtedly, sunspot activity will be blamed. Months before the cataclysms, satellite failure will be sporadic, impacting technology that supports lifestyle of today. Increasing space debris will also put International Space Station at risk, which will result in its hasty evacuation.
But this will scarcely be the biggest concern. Volcanic activity. Earthquakes taking cities down. Earth movement imploding buildings. And increasingly erratic weather, such that all are wondering whether crops will harvest. Stories in the news will be about crashed cities, broken bridges, and flooded rivers washing towns away. These types of situations will be on the increase, such that efforts to deal with one disaster after another will have emergency management teams exhausted in the months preceding the pole shift.
It will all become irrelevant when the Earth changes increase to the point where there are daily disasters everywhere. You will not wake one morning with scant days to scramble to safety. You will not find cities dropping into their sewers, and fault lines tearing a seam into a continent, without literally weeks of warnings, increasing collapse, and quakes, that make such a situation the logical consequence, not a surprise. Zeta talk. All these dramatic changes will happen within the 4-month period, in the main. By the end of these 4 months, satellites are non-functional, emergency management teams overwhelmed, and mankind without a doubt that the last weeks have arrived. Weeks before the passage, Planet X is fighting through Sun's magnetic flow lines, slowly crossing the ecliptic, and is forced to adjust to them. When it is below the ecliptic, it has no problem accommodating Sun's intake, Sun's magnetic south pole. But as it rises to the ecliptic, and moves above, this requires its north pole away from the Sun. Thus, Planet X performs a slow, 270-degree roll, turning slowly in space. This points Planet X's north pole directly at Earth. Magnetic fields clash. The Earth will try to push as far back in its orbit around the Sun as possible to evade the presence of the approaching Planet X. Thus, Planet X appears dramatically to the right of the Sun, in the line of the view. This allows unmistakable second Sun sightings, near rising, or setting Sun. The timing of this will not take you by surprise, as the inbound planet will be seen in the sky, without a telescope, for 7.5 weeks, 43 days, before the pole shift. Of course, It is visible now, as an occasional second sun capture, that is almost entirely lost in the glare of the sun, or object on Soho images. But we are talking about a full visibility that cannot be denied. Approximately 7 weeks before the pole shift, Planet X will become fully visible to all mankind. All will be able to see it. It will be seen by the common man, without the use of telescopes, noted by a farmer in his fields, and the ignorant public, standing in the street, and pointing at it in the sky. As the ancients have recorded, early in this 7-week period, it will look like a reddish cross in the skies.
And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. How large, and how bright will the cross become? At first, as infinite small as a dim star, but at passage, as large as the sun. But it will be growing much larger, so rapidly, that this will be a clue, that what you are looking at, is the Planet X complex. Its most distinguishing characteristic, would be its reddish appearance, fairly unique in the sky. It will have many explanations, depending upon the culture. A warning, a sign, an approaching angel or demon. The populace will be encouraged to discount these signs, given stories by NASA about distortions in the atmosphere, or an exploding star, a nova, which is only now becoming visible on Earth. For many, the fact that it is really going to happen, will be determined when this 7-week period begins, and comet becomes visible in the skies. The fact that it appeared, when, where, and in the manner predicted, will consume their consciousness.
As Planet X points its North Pole directly at Earth, the push of the Earth's vulnerable North Pole away will occur with more violence. The closer Planet X comes, the more intense the Earth wobble becomes. The push is stronger and faster, and the rebound back, to align with the Sun's dominant voice, likewise stronger and faster. The degree of wobble, how far the Earth swings, will steadily increase. And the weather will follow. Earth will develop such an extraordinary wobble, that it would sling its North Pole from one side to the other, in the course of a day. Scarcely something that will go unnoticed by the populace. As the Earth is trying to avoid emerging Planet X's North Pole, it swings erratically in many different directions. The Earth reels to and fro, like a drunkard. Isaiah 24:1-20. Earth will go through many gyrations in the last weeks. Man will be stunned at what the Earth will do. This will certainly put the sun, stars, moon, and constellations noticeably out of place. And all things on the earth shall alter, and shall not appear in their time. And the moon shall alter her order, and not appear at her time. And in those days, the sun shall be seen, and he shall journey in the evening, on the extremity of the great chariot in the west, and shall shine more brightly, than accords with the order of light. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order prescribed. And these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. And the whole order of the stars shall be concealed, and the thoughts of those on the earth shall err concerning them. Book of Enoch. The Kolbrin manuscript mentions that Noah began building his ark when the moon turned copper and moved swiftly across the sky, implying a definitive wobble. In those days, Noah saw that the earth became inclined, and that destruction approached. And he said, "Tell me what is transacting upon earth. For the earth labors, and is violently shaken." The Book of Enoch 64:1-3. Trying to evade the North Pole of Planet X, Earth pushes back in her orbit, as far as possible. Nevertheless, Planet X is still coming closer, closing the gap. Drunken lurch back and forth more and more accentuated, and the Earth leaning her North Pole increasingly away from the Sun, little by little falling to her side, until this is a static position. Thus, at some point, Earth is found essentially laying on her side, pointing her north pole to the left, if looking toward the Sun, from the northern hemisphere, with Planet X coming at Earth from the right-hand side. This makes for a lopsided arc of the Sun across the sky, during the day, the Sun seeming to rise over the North Pole, for a time, to astonished Earthlings. It will be accompanied by sightings of Planet X, off to the right of the Sun. At first, the appearance will be of an irregular orb. Then, the tail will be visible, and unmistakable. The complex will look almost as large as the Sun, approaching from the direction of the Sun. To evade this hose of magnetic particles, Earth rolls her north pole away from the Sun, and the passing Planet X, plunging northern hemisphere into darkness, for 3 days.
And there was a thick darkness in all the land for 3 days.
This change does not happen suddenly, it is progressive. It is a slow tip, but for inhabitants of Earth, a terrifying time. In addition to an obvious wobble, which becomes so extreme, that there is no question, a globe, falling to its side, will catch attention of even those, not normally noting the location of the Sun or stars. As the 270-degree roll continues, Earth is treated like a litter along the highway, dragged along with Planet X, adjusting to particle flows at the ecliptic. This literally turns the Earth upside down, for days, the Sun rising slightly to the west of the North Pole, again, well documented in folklore. One of the signs of the hour is the Sun rising from the west. And the Judgment Day will arrive, when the Sun rises in the west, Quran. This does not cause a pole shift, there is no tearing of the crust, as this is a slow swing, and the Earth's rotation continues in the same direction as before. Meanwhile, Planet X completes its 270-degree roll, and stands upright, with Earth following suit, and gradually righting itself. All North Poles are now pointing up again. It is at this time that Planet X finally arrives at the point of passage, and the daily grab of the Atlantic Rift begins significant slowing of the Earth's daily rotation. Planet X, as a dominant magnet, now insists that the Atlantic Rift stay in line, the turn toward dusk or dawn resisted. In the few weeks leading into rotation stoppage, after a severe wobble, with the North Pole tipping away into 3 days of darkness, and after the Earth seems to tip almost upside down, for 6 days, those who have not gone insane will be gripped with the necessity of figuring out what has just happened. The Colburn reports that during the Exodus, signs in the sky clued the populace that another pole shift was pending. Then, there was a period of stillness, relative calm, when the populace was tense, as they knew the prophecies, and knew what was pending. It is then that Planet X seems to be blocking the Sun, almost entirely, creating characteristic appearance, described by the ancients as a winged globe. In the final days, as the giant comet begins passing between the Earth and its Sun, total interference occurs. The part of the Earth facing the bully, the Atlantic Rift, is gripped magnetically by Planet X, so that it is loath to turn past this grip. This causes rotation to gradually stop. Where at present, the rate of slowing causes an occasional fraction of a second per year, there will be a point when this will get blatantly obvious. This slowdown first increases to minutes, then hours, and then a total stop occurs, within a day, a week prior to the shift. The day preceding stoppage, when rotation is slowing, will be longer than a 24-hour day, for a full turn of the globe. Sun sets 2-3 hours later than expected, in Europe, Africa, and the Americas. A day, when rotation rapidly slows to a stop, is a slow, 36-hour day. For those parts of the globe that missed a late sunset, Asia, Australia and Japan, it provides with a much delayed sunrise. Thus, slowed in its rotation, the Earth comes into the day with rotation that lacks momentum, and this time, when it lingers, it cannot escape. Rotation stops, with Atlantic Rift facing the approaching planet X, coming from the direction of the Sun, for 6 days. With pole shift happening at the end of those 6 days. This is recorded in written history and spoken folklore worldwide as a long day or night. The exact period of time, due to the lack of mechanical clocks, was not measurable, but those who experienced this described this as somewhere close to few days. On one side of the Earth, sun is not setting. Temperatures rise. Machines break down. Telephone lines are broken, and highways blocked with disabled cars. Those on foot don't last long in the heat. Essentially, all is heat-locked. People seek a cool spot and wait for whatever comes.
On the other side of the globe, perpetual night is reigning. One wakes up in the morning, finding it to be dark outside, rather than a breaking dawn. Yet, the clocks and the entire neighborhood confirm that it is indeed the morning hour. Here, activity is sleep-locked. Businesses do not open, as everyone is confused. Are the clocks broken? Lack of coordination is evident everywhere. Where does this lead, in a week? Will one side of the Earth cook, while the other freezes? Folklore tells mankind that such a situation does not occur, as there are survivors, and these survivors do not relay such problems. Temperature extremes will not surpass what mankind experiences today. Those in the day side will find it may be as hot as a very hot summer day, but no worse. And those in the night side may find they need to break out the blankets or start a fire, as in winter, but no worse than this.
Atmosphere circulation tends to equalize temperatures. When currents will be a bit more extreme, air masses tending to rush more, to equalize themselves, and oceans will swirl, creating more hurricane or typhoon-type activity. But likewise, this will not get more violent than man has experienced in the past. There is a braking mechanism that the atmosphere itself imposes, smoothing its ferocity. There will be increased stress on the crust, in the week of rotation stoppage, in which the core is attempting to turn, pressing to continue rotation, and the crust is resisting, locked by the planet X's grip on the Atlantic Rift. But they continue to stay together, as one unit. Thus, the Earth moans in her agony. All stress points in the crust become greatly exacerbated. There will be many quakes, renting quakes, with tearing of the rifts. Crevices will appear in roadways, buckling roads making travel difficult, if not impossible. Volcanic activity will greatly increase, and heat upon the Earth, quite outside of any seasonal variation. None of the wheels that drive commerce, or business, or utilities, or government, will operate in any degree.
Traffic lights freeze, such that roads become a mess of beeping horns. Frightened individuals, standing in the way, arguing over nothing, and refuse to be moved. The traveler attempting to drive somewhere, finds gas stations unattended, and cars out of gas, blocking the roads. All travel and traffic will be halted, all communications down, the world frozen in horror, waiting for the next blow.
During this time, Planet X complex will increase dramatically in size, horrifying those on the daylight side of the Earth. This occurs when Planet X comes close to Earth during rotation stoppage.
Men, stricken with terror, went mad at the awful sight in the heavens. The doom shape, called the Destroyer, was seen in all the lands thereabouts. In the glow of the Destroyer, the Earth was filled with redness. The Earth is hot and still. There is reddish glow over everything.
The ancients recorded this as a writhing fiery dragon in the sky, the tail of swirling moons giving this appearance. The red dragon of ancient prophecy. By this time, the continuous moaning and shuddering of the earth will have made any further imposition of martial law impossible. Disaster movies are so far from the truth in depicting the actions of any given government during a major crisis as to be ludicrous. Asteroids are falling from the sky, and everyone is calm, functioning. Government is like a rock of reason, taking the situation under control, and calmly evacuating millions of citizens. The establishment is at a loss as to what to say to their public. They cannot admit, as otherwise, they would have to admit, that they have known all along. When those in power determine that erratic panic is about to begin in the populace, then, admissions will be made, and frank discussion on what the common man can do to help himself. At that time, the announcement will include the fact that the government can do nothing to avert this, cannot do anything to protect its citizenry, and, more or less, the fact that those in government hope to see the survivors at the other end of cataclysms. And, good luck to all. When the last weeks creep upon the elite, they will retreat to their bunkers steadily, leaving the halls of power vacant, to barricade themselves. But the elite will find their plans utterly shattered. When rotation stoppage comes, there will be military assigned to keep mass civilians quiet, such as in tent camps set around the collapsed cities. When the military discovers that something they had not been informed of is in process, with no discussion about the safety of their families, they will not stand their posts. World has stopped rotating, fiery dragon in the sky, and only them and their soul exist at that moment. Local agencies would be sympathetic to the local populace, and would likely rebel, refusing to obey orders. The police, security services, would not be respected as enforceable, and would likely simply join the looting. Thus, true migration of the populace, and the military, occurs. Where conditions in nature can be predicted, those rooted in human nature, such as potential violence, are in the hands of man, subject to his free will, and thus, cannot be predicted accurately. Violent social disorder is unlikely to break out until it is quite clear to all of mankind that their life, their world, as they know it, is not going to continue beyond the next few weeks or months. Mankind wishes to believe that the future will be as the past has been, predictable. Sun rising. Crops bearing fruit. Occasional natural disasters. Unpredictable health problems. Elderly dying. And new babies being born. They cling to this until it is absolutely obvious that this will not continue. Human society will not collapse. Most people on Earth will be caught unaware, not having even heard the predictions about the passing planet. Most people on Earth deal with so many problems that their life is a daily struggle. Even where there is awareness, there will be little action. Many will look around them and hesitate to take any action. Leave the home, the comforts of familiar places and people. How would they live? Most, faced with these grim choices, will deal with the situation by denial.
denial is a common reaction to learning that the world you know is going to essentially disappear. Those who can handle the truth will note the holes in the explanations they are given, and an increasing cohesiveness of the facts, pointing to an approaching pole shift, a wandering planet making periodic passage. Those who cannot deal with the issue, and who are in the majority, will close their minds. They will see the facts, and discard them, with any number of excuses. As the facts become even more impelling, they will become more shrill, slipping into hardened denial, refusing to deal with the facts. In paralysis, no attempt to deal with the impending disaster is made. Sitting at home, and passing hours in diversion. Mother baking a birthday cake. There will be those who will try to continue their jobs, attempt to shop, and attend to their social functions, as though nothing was amiss. There will be gaiety, as gaiety is often the form of denial, when doom is nigh. Some will empty their saving accounts, spending everything that is left. Parties will be held. Whatever activity that is good to distract themselves. And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, drank, and married, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came, and destroyed them all.
Where the depth of this denial, affecting a larger portion of the population, seems incredulous. This is precisely what has occurred in New Orleans, and what is common during any natural emergency. Given orders to evacuate, many choose to remain, comforting themselves by denying the possibility of harm.
In spite of denial and suppression of talk about the approaching cataclysms, when the earth slows, and then stops in its rotation, the truth will be known.
When ye shall see the abomination of desolation, then may they flee to the mountains. And may him that is on the housetop not go down into the house, neither enter therein, to take anything away. And may him that is in the field not turn back to take up his garment.
Grieve upon those pregnant, and feeding with their breast in those days. Pray thus, that this does not happen in winter. It is during this time that those who sense the seriousness of the situation, but have no choice other than delay their preparation until the last moment, will attempt a final dash to safety.
If no one knows what is safe, they run from where they are, to anywhere else. Thus, roads become clogged by cars, moving in both directions, in and out of the cities. Having pierced the ecliptic, Planet X is picking up speed, propelled to exit the solar system. While adjusting to the magnetic flow lines, coming out from the Sun's North Pole, it performs another 270-degree roll. The tail of the passing planet, streaming from its North Pole, swings to point toward the Earth, when it is positioned at the closest distance, some 14 million miles from Earth, a short moment in time. It brings debris wafting into the atmosphere.
The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire, mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth.
This tail sweep first includes the red dust, fine iron oxide dust, that turned the waters of Nile red, during the time of the Jewish Exodus. Ponds and rivers turn red, the blood color mentioned in the Bible, giving the water brackish taste. When approaching the hour of the shift, the tail lashing will get extreme, with not only fine red dust, but gravel, then hailstones, and then occasional boulders falling. Gravel is defined in folklore as hailstones, which can injure homes, humans, and animals, caught under such a deluge. Boulders, some of which can be as large as a truck, cannot be defended against, but are rare. The heavy tail lashing, with hailstones and debris, is in effect at least few hours before the pole shift, less than 24 hours. It is a countdown sign that only hours remain. This is a sign that the shift is very close, within hours, and all should seek shelter under the sod, or metal roofs. As the passage nears, during that day, the earth will begin to groan and moan, the crust resisting. This is akin to rock screeching under pressure, that animals and some sensitive humans feel before an earthquake. However, before the hour of the pole shift, it will become almost constant and loud, such that it can be heard. The exact moment, or day of slippage, is difficult to determine, and depends on many things. Where the Earth can be found on either side of the Sun, during the passage, Planet X comes from the same direction each time it returns, the direction of Orion constellation. Its arrival can vary slightly, depending on various influences it encounters, while out in open space. The speed and severity of the shift, which can be forceful, or more gentle, likewise varies, depending on the exact location of the Earth, and so does the actual start of the shift. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel, both with wrath, and fierce anger. There has not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, in the years of many generations. The great day of the Lord is near. Even the mighty man shall cry bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Zephaniah 1:14-15. The pole shift is sudden, happening during the better part of an hour. It starts in an uncertain moment of time, when Planet X swings its north pole at Earth. The core wants to align with the passing planet, but the crust resists, wanting to stay with old established magnetic pole. This tension is released when the core breaks from the crust and moves. However, Earth's core drags the crust with it as it turns into new position. At first, there is a vibration of sorts, a jiggling, as the crust separates, and the stars, or the sun, or whatever visible in the sky, will move.
And the heavens receded like a scroll, when it is rolled together. And every mountain and island were moved from their places. And the stars shall fall from heaven, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And the heavens and the earth shall shake.
Do you see the moon or stars on the move? It has started. You have minutes to get safe, before the stop of this movement, when the great quakes happen, less than an hour. And the hills shall tremble. For the mountains shall depart, and the hills shall be removed. Moaning sounds from the earth will be replaced by tearing sound, jerking motions, as the crust separates. At the start of the shift, there is a strong clue that separation of the crust has started, and this is the uptick in the wind. As the crust moves, the atmosphere resists, and causes hurricane-force winds, worldwide. This will be unique, in that it will come from the direction the crust is moving to. Thou shalt be visited by the Lord of hosts, with thunder, and with earthquake, and great noise, with storm and tempest, and hailstones, and the flame of devouring fire. Then, there is a slide, where the crust is dragged, over minutes, to a new location. The core, being more free to move, in fact, attempts almost a 180-degree turn. But the crust, which has more resistance, does not make it to that degree, before stopping.
Therefore, I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place, in the wrath of the Lord, and in the day of his fierce anger.
Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty, and makes it waste, and turns it upside down, and scatters abroad the inhabitants thereof. The crust movement steps, as it arrives in its new location, during the hour of the shift, are as follows. 1. Earth's south pole, gripped by the passing 12th planet, is dragged north, and crust is torn from the core. Atlantic rips apart. Continents pulled apart, in the widening Atlantic, cause sinking land along its shores, the non-supported midpoint being pulled apart to drop. Plates south of the tips of South America and Africa are now freed from stress. This allows new land to pop up there. During the tearing of the Atlantic, and the dragging north of the North American continent, an already existing tear in the St. Lawrence Seaway tears further, virtually splitting the continent into two. Canada moves north, while the rest of the Americas cling to the Atlantic Rift, as it separates. Tearing of a continent is less traumatic than it would seem to humans. Plates are not a solid cohesive piece. It is more of an overlay of many rock strata, like a flaky pastry, overlapping. Plates are, in fact, holding together, because some of these layers have not fractured. When the bulge of Brazil has reached the position of the current North Pole, crust slippage stops. It is, in fact, where the crust stops, plates slamming into each other, when mountain building and massive earthquakes, up to Richter magnitude 15, occur. It is a series of jolts, in quick succession. And lo, there is a great earthquake, so mighty, and so great, such as was not since men were upon the earth. The earth is utterly broken down, for the earth is moved exceedingly. Where in the Atlantic, this will cause tearing apart. In the Pacific, the effect will be the opposite, sudden violent subduction. The immediate effect is felt most strongly in India, being pushed under the Himalayas, submerging this country in a wink. India, and western two-thirds of Australia, are submerged under the ocean. Plates, squeezed together, invariably find one plate acting as the loser, subducting, or fracturing into pieces that slant at an angle, to form new mountain ranges. Those on the plate that is being subducted, pushed down, are essentially crushed. Those riding on the upper plate will be dashed upwards, and crashed. Extreme friction causes upper plate to experience hot earth, heat being strong enough to melt rock in places. The strong stretch of the Atlantic pulls Africa away from Europe. The effect of this is to relieve tension along the African rift, such that it tears, promptly, in shuddering steps. Volcanoes in the Mediterranean will explode, due to an increased thinning in the crust. When major northern hemisphere plates stop, whatever follows, crashes into them. In the case of the Americas, this causes Central America and the Caribbean to crumble. Undoubtedly, volcanic eruptions will be simultaneous with big quakes. All volcanoes that have been active within the last 10,000 years can be expected to explode, as this is going to be a very severe pole shift. Earth's waters are first pulled in the direction of the shift, along with the crust, and then blocked in this motion by any land mass, first on one side of a water body, and then, later, on the other side, when the water sloshes back. It is when the crust stops that massive tidal waves roll slowly into the coastal areas. The waters heap up, in what appear to be giant waves. During a pole shift, the ocean as a whole is on the move because it stays behind while the crust moves, and thus, it rolls up on land in progressive inundation. Where tidal waves meet obstacles, this can result in tidal bore climbing up ravines. That is the reason why whale bones on mountain tops, well inland, were found. They were not lifted by tsunami waves. They arrived at these mountain tops because the entire ocean was on the move, and they could not escape the momentum. During the comet's passage, there is such an onslaught to the Earth's atmosphere that the upper atmosphere is severely battered and thinned in places. Now comes an occasional boulder, falling without resistance on the hapless Earth. Heated gases in the comet's tail form petrochemicals, which burst into flame when falling through the atmosphere. Where they are rare, these firestorms are devastating, and burn all beneath the falling wall of flame, in a fiery holocaust. And the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground. And the Lord rained hail upon the land. There was hail, and fire mingled with hail. And the hail smote through all the land, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail smote every herb of the field, and brake every tree of the field. Those who would escape the wicked lick of this tale, are advised to take shelter against cliffs, in caves, in valleys, or under metal roofs. Its passage is swift, a matter of days, and the ending abrupt. Hurricane-force winds persist for an hour, or more, after the shift, as the atmosphere adjusts, dragging along. Earthquakes come all at once, and rapidly settle down to an adjustment phase, within minutes. At the end of the hour, it will be apparent that it is safe to emerge, as jolting will have stopped. Have the stars, or the sun stopped moving? Then the shift is past, and it is safe to emerge from your shelters. It is over, and picking up the pieces can start.
Certainly, tending injured and rescued, and those trapped, is a first priority. Have teams looking for temporary shelters for all. Others could look for canned or pickled food supplies that hasn't broken. That stuff is going to spoil anyway. Refrigerators could be emptied and brought for a communal meal that night. A celebration of survival.
Having punched through the ecliptic, Planet X makes a rapid exit from the solar system. After having overshot the Sun, it comes to a stop at 1/4 Sun to Pluto distances. It lingers there for a short time, and positions itself for a second pass near the Sun, which occurs 7 years after the first passage. This second pass is on the other side of the Sun. But for the Earth, hapless in this matter, this may be an advantage or disadvantage, depending on where the Earth is in its orbit. A second set of cataclysms may occur at that time. Now Planet X is free to head toward its second foci, Sun's dead binary.
There will be much death. Most deaths will be so instantaneous that they will not even have time for anxiety. Concern should be for the survivors, who are basically in shock, may be injured, hungry, and looking in desperation for their loved ones.
During the pole shift, all plates are on the move, and thus, all experience Richter magnitude 15 quakes. The cities are destroyed, completely, with almost nothing left standing.
And there is a great cry in the land. For there was not a house, where there was not one dead. the land shall be utterly emptied. The inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. The city is broken down. Every house is shut up, that no man may come in.
Due to the immensity of the adjustment, there will be many aftershocks, most within the first few weeks. These will range from Richter 8 on down, but in no case will be as great as the initial shock during the pole shift. They will rapidly diminish, reduced to annoying tremors after a few weeks. Disaster movies of late, depicting a disaster similar to the coming pole shift, being fiction, are a single thread, one theme, like a piece of the puzzle, the big picture, that the public is not to comprehend until the last days. Where the real pole shift will be a net, a web of problems, happening all at once. Snapping electrical power lines, not as insulated as reported. Water and gas mains ruptured, leaking gas and water that conducts electricity. Combined with the adjustments under a city, this will set off explosions, not just limited to a building or a block, but ricocheting through the city, creating the Holocaust. Add to the mess the fact of tall buildings toppled by earthquakes, and people trapped in earthquake rubble, and you have a complete picture of what is to come. Suddenly, people find themselves for days without adequate food and drinking water. Phone lines and satellites are down, and all transmissions fighting interference. No roads or railroads supporting travel, no communications by any means, no electricity or hope of power restoration, and certainly no functioning government. The real pole shift is not fiction. The expectation of a return to normalcy could actually hinder psychological adjustments after the pole shift, as many would simply sit and wait for rescue. Most disasters are treatable, as they are a single blow, with rescue possible from regions not affected by the disaster. Pole shift will put the entire world into crisis mode, with no rescue underway. There will be no rescue, and normalcy will not return, as the broken link rule will prevail. Survivors must rely on themselves, be cooperative, and practical. Mankind has survived pole shifts in the past, and will survive this time. However, the coming pole shift will differ from past cataclysms in several aspects, all to a disadvantage for the present human population. First, a shift, as devastating as this one will be, has not occurred even within the past 50,000 years. During past cataclysms, the human population was also decimated, but, as primitive conditions prevailed, death from earthquake damage was slight, and almost all survivors were familiar with farming practices. Housing was light, such as single-story shacks of straw, with lightweight roofs, and this splintered, or blew away during earthquakes, rather than landing on, and crushing the inhabitants. Unless humans were unlucky enough to find themselves in the path of a tidal wave, or lava flow, they survived. Life became harder, of course, but following past cataclysms, survivors had not much less than before, as they had been living a bare survival existence as is. Where in the past, almost 100% of the populace were engaged in agriculture. Today, mechanized farming allows almost 100% of the population to be freed from this task. The population is rather urban than rural. These survivors will have almost no concept of how to live off the land. Because non-farming occupations are almost invariably physically idle, the population is soft. crowded cities are built up, stacking people on top of one another, in huge concrete buildings. Coastal areas are overpopulated, considered the best place for living. Man has created poisons and weapons that will be turned against him during and following the cataclysms. Chemical tanks will explode, spewing their contents.
Consequently, close to 90% of the population could be predicted to die as a direct or indirect result of the cataclysms.
After Planet X passes, the Earth has all the factors that created her orbit and her rotation in place, as before. There are static influences in the solar system that are not subject to change. The magnetic alignment is one. This is dominated by the Sun, and the Earth lines up with this. Earth's liquid core realigns without delay, reversing its 180-degree turn to, once again, position itself with the magnetic alignment of the Sun. Where the shift was sudden, dragging the core along with the crust, this realignment is slower. And the crust, already separated from the core, remains in its new position. For the Earth, frozen in place since rotation stoppage, rotation restarts within a day after 12th planet exit. Earth's rotation is not a leftover motion, instituted by some initial momentum, long ago, but is due to attraction and repulsion of the various components in the Earth's moving liquid core. The rogue planet disturbs this equilibrium. And when it has passed, departing, motion is reinstituted, and continues. As reported by Plato, it was noted in the history of man, that the Earth, at times, rotates in the opposite direction. The Sun, within this period of time, 341 generations, on several occasions, moved from his wonted course, twice rising where he now sets, and twice setting where he now rises. Plato, Dialogue Politicus, quoting Herodotus, quoting Egyptian record. Just what the Earth's tilt angle may be, the length of the day may be, and whether magnetic and geographic poles line up, is subject to change and chance. So, the crust has moved, ultimately, coming to a rest in a sharply different geography. Placing the new equator over formerly frozen lands, Greenland, Canada, Alaska, Siberia, and Europe. Inhabitants of the former polar areas may find themselves subject to severe sunburn for the first time in their lives. Already submerged India and the bulge of Brazil will find their tropical land becoming a new pole. They will freeze, snow steadily falling, and no indigenous vegetation or animal life will survive. Temperature plunges unremittingly, and they are ill-prepared. Those formerly on the equator will quickly freeze to death. Pole shift will radically affect the climate of every place on Earth. Initially, local climate of any given point on Earth will be affected by former climate. This will only be extreme where the ice packs linger or the ground is deeply frozen. Elsewhere, warming or cooling to temperatures appropriate for the new latitude occurs within days. Where temperate species find themselves in tropical areas, they find it an advantage and simply do better. Areas now tropical along the equator, which will move into temperate zones, will experience a shock. Few areas will find their climate remaining essentially the same, by coincidence having the same relative latitude as before. Winds will establish into a familiar pattern of the prevailing westerlies, as this pattern is related to the rotation of the Earth. Old polar ice will melt. while at the same time, new ice caps will form in new locations. Melting occurs faster, as the former poles will now be facing the sun, and the buildup of new ice caps comes from precipitation, this accumulation requiring hundreds of years. Thus, new poles take centuries to fully form. And thus, melting poles and heated ocean waters, expanding in volume, will raise the global sea level by 650 to 700 feet, 200 meters, within 2 years after the cataclysm. Waters will not recede for centuries until the ice caps reform, tying up this excess water once again in polar ice. This pace is gradual. Over time, the plants and animals change, accommodating to climate change. The die-off is massive, but opportunists survive. Over time, a creep occurs. Plants grow toward the places where they find more hospitable conditions. Animals either adjust to new conditions or travel. After a time, a few centuries, the Earth looks much as it did before, with new poles, a new equator, and newly established temperate zones. Due to the fact that all volcanoes, active and inactive, will explode and gush lava and ash during the pole shift. And because volcanic activity will continue for some decades after that, due to the roiling of the Earth's core, before it finally settles down. A dense cloud cover of volcanic dust will blanket the atmosphere for decades. Due to a loss of a significant portion of the upper atmosphere during the lashing by the comet's tail, the dust-filled clouds are low to the ground, like continuous fog, and create a constant gloom. As the atmosphere is low, it tends to drop any water it picks rather quickly. Thus, rain and drizzle occur almost continuously. This does not mean that survivors must live in their raincoats, as this will be a reducing phenomena. Where sunlight cannot penetrate, and seldom manages to peek through this dense cloud cover, it does warm the atmosphere. And thus, warming influence is not lost on the Earth. Less warmth from the sunlight, but warm, wet air. However, this depends strongly on the location and analysis of where the volcanic ash will blow, considering the new direction of prevailing winds. Areas downwind from volcanoes. In the path of heavy volcanic ash, can expect to feel like Moses, groping through dusk in the valley of death for decades. Other locations will find the gloom to be like overcast days. The sun rarely shining through, but occasional sunbeam, like a promise. Except for those few who have prepared, humans surviving the cataclysms will find themselves without food. The gloom that follows the cataclysm is devastating to plant life. However, it is possible to get a sunburn even under clouds. So clouds are not a death sentence to vegetation. Some vegetation will struggle through, but crops will be pathetic to non-existent. In areas not in the path of volcanic ash, but affected by the overall gloom, one might estimate a 50% reduction in sunlight and crop success. Plants will struggle along, or simply give way to others that will flourish. This would include plants that grow in the gloom or shade, as well as weeds, as they are hardy. Weeds may not be welcomed now, in fact expelled, but in the aftertime may become the most likely produce. Survivors will soon find what manages to give a return, and what not. Those who survive learn to eat everything that could be found: bark, moss, leaves, including bugs, which are numerous, growing in great numbers in the humidity that seems to be everywhere. In the meantime, they starve. Where there is a chronic dusk, due to volcanic dust, life will go on. Times will be terribly harsh. Infrastructure utterly shattered. No services and stores. Broken link rule applies. With no spare parts, and no machinery, and, most importantly, no skilled hands to manufacture it, industrial and technological era, essentially come to an end. No generalized electricity supply. People lose their teeth, have broken bones that are poorly set, medical and dental care in the hands of non-professionals, and no antibiotics. World is back to third world existence. End of the world as we know it, in fact. Government non-existent. Former establishment, if preserved, able to exert its authority into no more than local neighborhood. Money losing value entirely, becoming worthless. With no law enforcement. Marauding gangs ravage the cities, and raid survival communities, looting what has survived. Cannibalism will occur. Hungry wild dog packs, roaming free, preying for occasional human, in former urban areas. Former cities are not a pretty place, in general. Meanwhile, the survivors wander. They are seeking a land where the sun shines as it used to, being sure that they are simply in an unfavorable location. The Earth recovers, depending to its location relative to active volcanoes in the main. A gloomy atmosphere, with a cloud cover, will last for at least 2 decades, and then dissipate over the next years. Rainfall will be almost continuous, washing down the newly raised volcanic dust and heavy metals. Pollutants, such as chemicals from processing plants, will be dispersed worldwide. And the atmosphere, with its many problems, will be reformed afresh. Few years after the shift, sporadic sunlight will warm the Earth. The skies clear, and gloomy days are lightening up. This volcanic ash will create dramatic sunsets and dawns, far beyond what mankind expects today. An orange sky will become almost the norm, so that children, born during this era, will be shocked, some decades afterwards, when the skies regain their normal blue color. 15 years after the shift, some areas could almost consider themselves recovered, thinking this a return to normalcy, in their joy. So much better than before, that it seems like heaven. A land of milk and honey. The Earth of the future will clear up. Polluting practices, such as burning oil and chemical additives, will essentially stop. As man, the great plunderer, has essentially disappeared, the Earth will eventually recover much of its natural diversity and richness. Vegetation regrows, in proportion to the sunlight, that manages to work its way through the dense cloud cover. Decades later, when the right conditions emerge, seeds magically sprout. Only a brave sprout of 2, at first. forests that have been leveled by hurricane winds or burned to the ground by firestorms regrow from seedlings. Within a few decades, young forests have reappeared. After a few decades, steel and concrete buildings that find no hands to repair them fall victim to rust and the inexorable assault of vegetation, taking root in wind-blown clumps of volcanic ash that settles there. Forests begin reclaiming fields and towns, home to birds, wild deer, and predators. Many species that almost seemed extinct will return to their usual ways and seem to suddenly reappear. Increased carbon dioxide in the air after the pole shift benefits ocean life. Kelp and other life in the oceans flourishes. New land, emerging from the ocean between Antarctica and Africa, will be moist, tropical, and highly fertile. Any seed landing there will flourish. Cataclysms present those who want to survive with several challenges. Hailstones, firestorms with brief period of oxygen depletion, earthquakes of a magnitude never experienced on the memory of the current civilization, rapid mountain building, spewing volcanoes, winds of hurricane force, and tidal waves high enough to sweep over tall buildings. What to do? The prevailing tone of 2012 movies of late is, almost everyone dies, except a handful of greedy and selfish members of the elite, or those who side with them, so that the common man needs not even bother trying to survive. But history and geology tell you that Earth has periodically experienced a crustal shift, with predictable and survivable devastation. Ideally, this should all be taken in steps, with the past examined. Prophecy read, with an open heart. Then, the mechanics of the shift itself digested. An emotional adjustment to what life afterwards holds. Once emotionally prepared to go through the shift, and have a diminished lifestyle afterwards, solid and practical plans can be made. The first consideration should be survival of the shift itself. To the degree that it is possible, take yourself to a relatively safe location, at least by the time the rotation of the Earth still occurs. There are many places on Earth that will be relatively safer than others. Common sense can be a guide. Research your location from the standpoint of the climate that will exist after the pole shift. This is quickly ascertained by the new geography map. Research your elevation above sea level, where the water will rise 675 feet, 200 meters, within 2 years after the pole shift, and will not recede for centuries. Clearly, safety involves removing oneself from active, or even relatively active volcanoes, within the last 10,000 years. And being upwind from the ash fault. Those living on a fault line can find semi-molten lava suddenly oozing out, adding to subduction, and ground heated white hot, from friction. Areas subject to mountain building in the recent past can be anticipated to have mountain building again during the coming pole shift. This includes the west coast of the Americas and Himalayas. There will be no mountain building in Europe during this cataclysm, though no mountains could be considered safe. Earthquakes will happen frankly everywhere. As during the pole shift, all is on the move. So no place could expect to be exempt. Cities will not be safe. Most of the cities Most of existing structures will crumble, even if they have been reinforced. Beyond collapsing buildings, gas lines and gasoline storage will be in flames, and the whole place is likely to become an inferno. In that all buildings will collapse during earthquakes, it is best to have less or no structures around you at that time. Tidal waves. General guide is to be 100 miles inland from any coastline and 200 feet up above sea level. So where does that leave the human, if he is not to use existing structures, and yet has to protect himself from wind and firestorms? The best solution is to dig a shallow trench. Not underground, buried, but only a shallow trench. Cover this by a metal sheet, well anchored, or wooden boards, with sawed top, so they will not burn. This provides cover from the wind, from firestorms, and a long trench of this nature will prevent you from being suffocated in case of oxygen depletion during firestorm. Laying in a shallow trench during earthquakes, one cannot be dashed. One can be thrown a few inches to the side, at most. For large meteors, which are few, there is no safety measure to be taken. Rely on luck there. Thus, except for what may fall upon this covered trench, no worry. Take caution that such a trench is not in a heavily wooded area, where trees, landing upon it, can prevent escape afterwards. Choose a hilltop, a flat, or slightly sloping area, brushy, so the soil will not wash away. Better leave both ends of this trench open, so that those using it can crawl out at either end. Thus, with a few days' warning, a shovel, and a bit of effort, even the poorest among the Earth's population can survive. This should be the very best method of surviving the pole shift itself. Life afterwards is a more murky issue, which comes after resolution of safety during the shift itself. Most survivalist preparedness advice assumes a short crisis period with the ability to stock up and then return to normal life. Pole shift will present survivors with a post-catastrophe situation, long-term, worldwide, without the ability to recover and recharge supplies. Having supplies, canned or dried foods, and lots of clean water at hand is certainly a good idea. It gives a good start. But what happens when this eventually runs out? When planning, think long-term. Remember, self-reliance should be the mode. And whatever items you choose must have an easy replenishment supply. You will not be able to just go to a shop and buy what you need. Everyone should plan, and at least mentally prepare, for being without any material possessions whatsoever. Start with life with nothing but bugs. And drinking dirty water from the ground with your hands. No clothes. No heat. Nothing. Then add what is needed most, and first. Heat. Shelter. Then, food. Bugs, if need be. And weeds. Then, how to clean your food. Then how to grow, or gather food more effectively. You may have to sleep in the open, or construct a temporary shelter from trash at hand. You may have to eat what you can find, and should familiarize yourself with what that might be, and cooking, or eating methods to be used. You may have to drink whatever water you can find, and should consider no filters, or electricity, or fire available, and how to purify the water in those circumstances. You think of the minimum, not the optimal, and how to arrange it. When you've got the minimum, start adding to that, but only when the minimum is addressed. If one makes those mental preparations, then they are prepared for the worst. This is not a horror, this is but a return to a life that existed just a century ago. Think about third world conditions and adaptations, or life in industrialized countries, some 100 years ago. It is only recently, in the developed world, that mankind has come to expect life to be otherwise. Due to continuous rain and toxic volcanic ash, those looking to crops will find this is not the way to go in the immediate aftertime. Get familiar with edible weeds and mushrooms that grow in your area. Insects are eaten in many cultures world over and can be an excellent supply of protein. Consider indoor gardening with artificial light source, such as hydroponics. Learn how to fish. Oceans and inland lakes will do better, will be lush, and will provide the best food source for survivors. But the only real answer to a reliable food supply is to produce your own. If you can't ensure a long-term supply of food for your group, then you're not prepared at all. Producing your own food on a constant basis means you have to do it all, from preparing a garden bed for planting, raising, and preserving your produce, to saving your own seed for next year. The initial effort to set up a garden and small animal facilities is time-consuming, but it is a one-shot effort. For a few hours work a week in home food production, from late April through October, you can raise, prepare, and store most of your food for a year. Surface, rain, and even well water will be polluted by sewage, industrial chemicals, volcanic dust, and parasites. Distilling your drinking water gets rid of all of that, even the heavy metals. It leaves all of that behind. Better to distill all water that you will use for drinking. Matches will only last so long. Simple friction will start a fire, and a simple flint device could be purchased for just a couple bucks. One will have to learn to make his own clothes, and most importantly, shoes. Needle and thread will become a precious possession in the aftertime. Again, research medicinal plants and herbs in your area that can heal great many of conditions, if not all. Pay extremely careful attention to your feet. When you're on foot, it only takes one slip to produce a compound fracture, immobilizing you and opening skin to infection. At that point, your odds have been cut many-fold. As in the days of yore, establish an outhouse, and make sure everyone uses bathtub. The recipe for soap is very simple. Run water through some ashes to obtain lye, and boil this on the stove with some plant or animal fat. When there is no fat, you can wash in lye just as well. It could be anything, from a wooden log cabin to simple tents, or adobe or cob house, a houseboat to a metal container half buried in the soft ground. lots of options exist, which could be researched and tried. Hopefully, after the pole shift, there will be plenty of various junk scattered around, which could be used to make almost anything. One just has to be creative and use his imagination. Forget your power tools. The grid will be down, and fuel for generators will sooner or later run out. In the old days, hand tools were all that existed, and homes went up. Lumber was cut, and carriages and furniture were built. Save educational material. There is no reason why all technology and knowledge should be lost entirely, just because the infrastructure of human society has been torn apart. Where there is communal cooperation among people, the odds are not really that bad. If you are in a rural area, familiar with gardening, and chickens, and the old hand water pumps in the yard, and hand tools, you can expect to live no worse than the Amish today. And if you know how to build a windmill from junk lying about, you will have electricity. The grids will be down, and generators powered by gasoline won't run for long. Relying on wind or water power is best. Wind or water turbines can be made from old car parts. Those who prepared will be faced with the need to protect themselves. The best defense would be keeping a low-key profile and organized community resistance. Keep in mind that trapping an offender and giving him what he plans to give to you is not cruel, it is karmic justice. Zeta Talk. This will be a decreasing problem, however. With every day that passes, the danger from other groups of people, desperate for what little you may have, decreases. Those engaging in these marauding gangs are prone to backstabbing each other. Infighting will break out. And few weeks after the Cataclysm, there will simply be nothing more left to loot. The selfish do not help each other, killing each other, and thus find themselves starving, and eventually dying off, their numbers dwindling rapidly. Within the couple of months, there will be very few that have survived. The good-hearted folk will prevail, overall. Being able to cooperate and care for each other. Most important is a cooperative spirit in the group, with a willingness to undertake distasteful tasks, desire to share among all what little there may be, and a positive attitude toward the future. A right attitude of hope, expectation that things will get better, and a sense of excitement about what future might bring will do more for survival than anything else. While many decide that they don't see what is there to live for. Think about those who would be caught unaware, without protection, vulnerable to the worst nightmares. What to eat, where to go, and what to expect over the next few months. The reason to consider otherwise is that others will need you. You have that advantage, that you know what is coming. Cataclysms offer an opportunity, as does life in general, to be greatly of service. One should not assume a totally grim picture of life after the cataclysms. Look upon this as a transition time, keeping an eye on the horizon, the long term. Take heart. The day of your liberation is coming. Most of mankind walks through life following rules and expectations dictated by organized religions, media, big corporate interests, school system, the military, government edicts, interpreted by the courts and police, implied or agreed upon by current social mores. Governments consider all citizens to be their property and insist on the numerous entanglements to be wrapped around an individual from childhood on. One must have schooling, be papered, get a job, be taxed, and produce an offspring that are likewise controlled. There must be no escape. Pay your dues. Work hard every day. And obey. Raised to follow the rules, or face the consequence. Most humans, in all cultures, do so, without stepping outside these invisible bounds. Coming earth changes will present those thousands in a quiet revolt, harboring their seething resentment, with an opportunity to step into a different mode of action. For every rebel, there is a personal revolution building and waiting for an opportunity. No longer forced to put in hours that restrict one's life virtually to the workplace. No longer forced to pander to the supervisor or boss and keep in check one's expression to reflect the proper attitude. No longer forced to repress the urge to spontaneously help others. The former dutiful citizen suddenly feels an infusion of energy they had lost early in life as restrictions closed about them like a net, and perhaps feeling alive for the first time in decades. A downside, suddenly up. Where in stable times, it is almost always the case that strong and insidious rule the weak. And nice guys always seem to finish last. During the tumultuous times, playing field is leveled. Pole shift will be a great equalizer in this regard. No man will be safe, all will be affected. Earth changes will allow love to be expressed among those who realize how short life can be and how precious moments in each other's company are.
Love may have a blooming after the shift, as it ought. Those with great love in their hearts, coming to realization that little else matters.
The time after the cataclysms, what is termed the aftertime, will be a time of great opportunity, where all the foundations of the past have been shattered, and all is to be rebuilt. Creative nature relishes such times. It is the end of the old world, and the beginning of the new one. The courageous will find a bountiful return for their efforts. Natural leaders will emerge. It will be a time when the capacities of each can be stretched to their limits. One can grow and discover strengths and talents within themselves they had not imagined. Although this time, civilization is not expected to be re-established, ever. And humans are likely to, eventually, become extinct species. Bright future is waiting for mankind. Earth is scheduled to become a home to good-hearted folk, exclusively. Something that could be described as heaven on earth or 1,000 years God's kingdom. The righteous shall inherit the land, and dwell therein forever. For the fashion of this world passes away. Where current human form will die out in time, it will ultimately be replaced by a hybrid race that has been developed by ambassadors from Zeta Reticuli. The Earth will have visitors from all parts of the universe. Mingling freely in human society. And humans of the future will become galactic citizens and space travelers themselves.
Not every soul on earth will die, as the dragon's tail goes sweeping by. Not every land on earth will sink, but these will wallow in stench and stink, of rotting bodies of beast and man, of vegetation creased on land. And those that live will ever fear the dragon's tail for many years. But time erases memory. You think it strange, but it will be. And before the race is built anew, a silver serpent comes to view, and spew out men of like unknown, to mingle with the earth, now grown. And these men can enlighten the minds of future man, to intermingle and show them how to live and love, and thus endow the children with the second sight, a natural thing, so that they might grow graceful, humble, and when they do, the golden age will start anew. The dragon's tail is but a sign for mankind's fall and man's decline. And before this prophecy is done, I shall be burned at stake, at one. My body singed, and my soul set free. You think I utter blasphemy? You're wrong. These things have come to me. This prophecy will come to be.